Sir, you need to move to the back. This section is for real passengers who actually paid for their seats, not charity cases with fake military costumes. The words cut through Delta Flight 447's first-class cabin like a blade. Colonel David Washington, 52, stood frozen in the aisle, his dress blue uniform crisp with service ribbons earned over 2 decades. In his weathered hands, he clutched a folded American flag and official escort orders. Flight attendant Jessica Chen, blonde hair pulled tight, crossed her arms and blocked his path. Her voice carried loud enough for every passenger to hear. The businessman in 2A looked up from his phone. The elderly woman in 1C stopped mid-sip of her coffee. Colonel Washington's jaw tightened. Behind him, through the plane's window, a flag-draped casket waited on the tarmac. Have you ever been judged so harshly that people refused to believe your achievements were real? Flight departure in 18 minutes. Jessica Chen's manicured finger tapped impatiently against her hip. I need to see proof of purchase for that seat, sir. She emphasized the last word with barely concealed disdain. Colonel Washington reached into his breast pocket, producing a first-class boarding pass. Here's my confirmation. Jessica barely glanced at it. Anyone can print a fake ticket these days. She rolled her eyes toward the other passengers. Security deals with this kind of thing all the time. The businessman in 2A lifted his phone slightly. The screen showed Instagram Live with 47 viewers watching. Comments began trickling in. What's happening? Is that really military? Ma'am, this is legitimate documentation. Colonel Washington's voice remained steady, but his grip tightened on the folded flag. Sure it is. Jessica's tone dripped skepticism. She gestured toward his uniform. Those ribbons could be from any costume shop. A flight attendant named Mark approached from the galley, drawn by the commotion. His eyes darted between Jessica and the colonel. Everything okay here, Jess? Just handling someone trying to scam an upgrade. Jessica's voice carried across the cabin. Several passengers turned to stare. Colonel Washington pulled out his military ID, holding it steady. The card clearly displayed his rank. Colonel. Service dates spanning 2 decades. A Pentagon address. Jessica squinted at it dismissively. These are probably fake, too. You'd be surprised what people do for free flights. Flight departure in 15 minutes. The phone in 2A buzzed with notifications. The live stream viewer count jumped to 156. Comments flooded faster. This is wrong. Help him. What airline is this? I'm escorting a fallen soldier home, Colonel Washington said quietly. Through the window, ground crew moved carefully around the flag-draped casket. Sergeant Maria Rodriguez gave her life overseas. Jessica glanced toward the window, then back at him. Anyone can make up a sob story. Captain Reynolds emerged from the cockpit, clipboard in hand. A man in his 50s with graying temples and 20 years of airline experience. He approached the group cautiously. What seems to be the issue? Jessica straightened, adopting a professional tone. Sir, this passenger claims to have first-class tickets, but I have concerns about authenticity. The captain examined Colonel Washington's boarding pass and ID. His brow furrowed slightly. The documents appeared legitimate. Professional printing, proper airline codes, Pentagon address. These look authentic to me, he said slowly. With respect, Captain, Jessica interrupted. I've seen plenty of forgeries. We can't risk security breaches. A gate agent named Lisa appeared at the aircraft door, drawn by the delay. She was young, maybe 25, with nervous energy and limited experience handling conflicts. Is there a problem? We're showing a departure delay. Jessica seized the opportunity. This gentleman is trying to board with questionable documentation. We need security verification. Lisa glanced at the documents, then at Colonel Washington's uniform. The ribbons, the pressed fabric, the polished brass, everything appeared authentic. But Jessica's confidence made her doubt her own assessment. I think we should call security, Lisa said hesitantly. Flight departure in 12 minutes. The live stream in 2A now showed 340 viewers. The businessman whispered to his camera, "This man is clearly military. This is completely wrong." Colonel Washington's phone buzzed. The caller ID flashed, DOD urgent. He glanced at the screen, then declined the call. More important matters required his attention. Airport Security Officer Martinez approached reluctantly. A veteran himself, he recognized the signs, the bearing, the uniform details, the quiet dignity under pressure. But protocol demanded he respond to crew requests. "Sir, I need to ask you to step aside for a moment." "Officer, I have proper documentation and a fallen soldier waiting." Colonel Washington's voice remained controlled, but tension crept into his shoulders. Jessica crossed her arms triumphantly. Finally, someone with actual authority. The other first-class passengers began showing signs of irritation. A woman in 1D checked her watch. A businessman in 3A muttered about delays. The atmosphere grew thick with judgment and curiosity. "Look," Jessica announced to the cabin, "we're dealing with a situation here. These things happen when people try to game the system." Colonel Washington stood silently, his jaw clenched. The flag in his hands represented more than fabric. It carried the weight of promise, of honor, of a young woman who would never see home again. Through the window, Sergeant Rodriguez's casket waited under the afternoon sun. Her family would be gathering at the airport in Denver, expecting their daughter to arrive with full military honors. Every minute of delay was another minute of their anguish. Flight departure in 10 minutes. "I understand your procedures," Colonel Washington said quietly, "but this soldier deserves to get home." "Save the speech," Jessica snapped. "Security will sort this out." The live stream viewer count hit 520. Local hashtags began trending. #Delta discrimination. #military respect. Comments poured in from military families sharing similar experiences. Captain Reynolds checked his watch nervously. Air traffic control was holding their departure slot, but not indefinitely. Other flights were backing up behind them. "We need to resolve this quickly," he said. Officer Martinez examined the documents more carefully. The ID looked legitimate. The boarding pass matched airline records. The uniform appeared authentic down to the smallest details, but the crew seemed certain something was wrong. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step off the aircraft for verification." Colonel Washington looked through the window at the casket one more time. Sergeant Rodriguez had been 23 years old. A daughter, a sister, a soldier who died serving her country. She deserved better than this circus. "Very well," he said quietly. Jessica smiled with satisfaction as the colonel moved toward the exit. "Flight departure in 8 minutes. Departure." The jet bridge felt cramped with bodies. Colonel Washington stood surrounded. Officer Martinez to his left, Jessica Chen behind him, Gate Supervisor Patricia approaching from the terminal. The walls seemed to close in as more authority figures arrived. Patricia was a woman in her 50s, weathered by decades of airport crises. She carried herself with the tired confidence of someone who'd seen everything twice. Her radio crackled with updates from other gates. "Sir, we need to resolve this situation quickly." Patricia's voice carried the weight of operational pressure. "I understand there are concerns about documentation." The live stream in 2A had exploded. The viewer count jumped to 1,200 as the passenger whispered urgent commentary. "They're forcing him off the plane now. This is insane." Comments flooded the screen faster than anyone could read them. "This is disgusting." "Someone call the news." "What's his name?" "Military families deserve better." Jessica stepped forward eagerly. "Ma'am, this gentleman has suspicious documents. I believe he's impersonating military personnel for upgrade fraud." Patricia examined Colonel Washington's ID and boarding pass with practiced efficiency. The documents looked legitimate. Professional printing, proper seals, consistent information. But Jessica's certainty gave her pause. "These appear authentic. Patricia said slowly. But given the crew's concerns... He could have stolen them from a real soldier, Jessica interrupted, her voice rising with excitement. You'd be amazed what people do these days. Flight departure in 5 minutes. Through the jet bridge windows, passengers on the plane pressed their faces against glass. Phones appeared at multiple windows, recording the confrontation. The incident was being documented from every angle. Ma'am, I need to get Sergeant Rodriguez home to her family. Colonel Washington's voice remained steady, but strain showed around his eyes. Every minute we delay is another minute they're waiting. Save the performance, Jessica snapped. Security sees through these acts every day. Local news affiliate KDN received a tip from a viewer watching the live stream. Assignment editor Maria Santos dispatched a crew immediately. Military discrimination at DIA, get there now. The hashtag #HadDeltaDiscrimination began trending locally. Military family support groups started sharing the live stream. The viewer count hit 2,800 and climbing. Officer Martinez felt increasingly uncomfortable. The colonel's bearing, the attention to uniform details, the quiet dignity, everything screamed authentic military, but protocol demanded he follow crew requests. Sir, I'm going to need you to remove your jacket for inspection. The words hit Colonel Washington like a physical blow. In 24 years of service, through deployments in 3 different countries, he'd never been asked to prove his legitimacy. The humiliation burned. He slowly unbuttoned his dress blue jacket, revealing the white shirt underneath. The ribbons and badges came off with the jacket. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Combat Infantry Badge. Each one earned through sacrifice and service. Jessica watched with satisfaction as several passengers filmed from the plane windows. This is standard procedure for suspicious individuals. Flight departure in 3 minutes. Captain Reynolds' radio crackled with increasingly urgent messages from air traffic control. Delta 447, we need your departure time or we'll have to reassign your slot. Control, we have a passenger verification issue. Need a few more minutes. Delta 447, you're backing up traffic. How much longer? The pressure mounted from every direction. The captain checked his watch nervously. Delayed departures meant missed connections, angry passengers, and corporate scrutiny. Through the terminal, news van lights appeared in the distance. KDEN had arrived faster than expected, guided by the viral live stream that now showed the colonel standing shirtless on the jet bridge. Comments exploded across social media. This is Colonel David Washington from the Pentagon. Someone tagged this to CNN. My dad served with him in Afghanistan. This is a national disgrace. Patricia's radio crackled with updates from other supervisors. Word was spreading through airport management. The Terminal Operations Center was fielding calls from local media. Sir, we're going to need you to come to the security office for full verification, Officer Martinez said reluctantly. Colonel Washington looked through the window at Sergeant Rodriguez's casket. The ground crew had covered it with a protective tarp, but the flag's corner remained visible. She was so young, barely 23. Her mother would be pacing the Denver airport, checking every arrival board. I've given you everything you've requested, he said quietly. What more do you need? Jessica stepped closer, emboldened by the crowd of officials. Maybe some honest answers about where you really got that uniform. The businessman in 2A angled his phone to capture Jessica's words. The live stream audience erupted with outrage. Military hashtags began trending nationally as veterans shared the stream. Flight departure in 2 minutes. Delta 447, this is your final warning. Depart now or lose your slot. Captain Reynolds felt sweat beading on his forehead. A missed slot meant a 2-hour delay minimum. Hundreds of passengers would miss connections. The airline would face thousands in compensation costs. Control, we need 60 more seconds. Negative, Delta 447. Make your decision now. Patricia's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Delta corporate headquarters. The caller ID showed Regional Operations Director. She declined the call. Whatever they wanted could wait until this crisis was resolved. But corporate had been monitoring social media mentions. The hashtag Delta Discrimination hashtag was approaching 5,000 shares. Local news was already setting up outside the terminal. Stock analysts were beginning to take notice. "Sir, I'm afraid you'll need to come with us," Patricia said with finality. Colonel Washington stood motionless for a moment, studying the faces around him. Jessica's triumphant smirk, Officer Martinez's uncomfortable compliance, Patricia's bureaucratic efficiency, all of them treating him like a criminal instead of a decorated veteran. Through the window, Sergeant Rodriguez waited in her flag-draped casket. A young woman who'd never questioned his service, who'd understood the meaning of sacrifice. She deserved better than this circus. "Very well," he said quietly, reaching for his phone. Jessica's eyes lit up with victory. Finally, some cooperation. But instead of following Officer Martinez toward the security office, Colonel Washington calmly dialed a number. The phone rang once before connecting. "General Morrison? This is Colonel Washington. I need immediate Pentagon protocol activation." The jet bridge fell silent except for the distant hum of aircraft engines. Jessica's confident smile began to fade as she registered the authority in his voice. Officer Martinez stopped mid-step, his hand instinctively moving to his radio. Patricia's eyes widened as she recognized the shift in atmosphere. On the plane, the businessman in 2A whispered to his audience, "He just called the Pentagon. Something's about to happen." The live stream viewer count hit 4,200 and climbing. Comments flooded faster than the system could display them. Military families across the country watched in anticipation. Colonel Washington kept the phone pressed to his ear, his voice calm but commanding. "Sir, we have a situation at Denver International. Military escort privileges are being violated during a dignified transfer." Jessica stepped backward involuntarily. The confidence that had carried her through the confrontation began to crumble as she realized she might have miscalculated. Flight departure delayed. The voice on the other end of Colonel Washington's phone carried the authority of 4 stars and 30 years of military command. General Morrison's words were crisp, decisive, and immediate. "Colonel, Protocol 77 Alpha is now active. Stand by for verification calls." Within 90 seconds, every official phone on the jet bridge began ringing simultaneously. Captain Reynolds' phone buzzed first. The caller ID showed Pentagon Operations Center. His hands trembled slightly as he answered. "Captain Reynolds, this is Brigadier General Patricia Hayes, DoD Transportation Command. You are currently detaining Colonel David Washington, Pentagon Director of Military Family Affairs. Is this correct?" The captain's face drained of color. "Yes, ma'am. There was confusion about—" "Captain, you have 30 seconds to resolve this confusion. Colonel Washington has federal authority over all military remains transport. This is a dignified transfer operation." Gate Supervisor Patricia's radio crackled with an emergency message from Denver International's Operations Center. "Patricia, this is Command. We're receiving calls from Washington, D.C. What's your status on the military escort situation?" Her phone rang immediately after. The caller ID showed Delta Corporate Headquarters, emergency line. "Patricia, this is Regional Director James Mitchell. We're monitoring a social media situation involving military discrimination. What the hell is happening out there?" Officer Martinez's radio erupted with traffic from multiple agencies. TSA headquarters, Department of Defense liaison, even FBI domestic affairs. The normally quiet security channel became a cacophony of urgent communications. The live stream in 2A captured every moment of the chaos. The businessman whispered breathlessly to his 6,400 viewers, "Every phone is ringing. Something major is happening." Comments flooded the screen. "Pentagon just activated." "Holy shit, this is real." "Jessica is about to get destroyed." "Military Twitter is going insane." Jessica Chen stood frozen, watching the transformation around her. 90 seconds ago, she'd controlled the situation. Now, every authority figure avoided eye contact with her. Colonel Washington remained calm, his phone still pressed to his ear. "General Morrison, All relevant personnel are being contacted. Pentagon Protocol 77 Alpha is in effect. Understood, Colonel. Secretary of Defense has been briefed. Congressional Military Affairs Committee is monitoring. Handle this with your usual discretion. Captain Reynolds approached Colonel Washington with visible deference. His entire demeanor had shifted from cautious cooperation to respectful urgency. Colonel Washington, I sincerely apologize for this misunderstanding. If you'll please return to your seat, we'll departure immediately. Patricia stepped forward, her radio still crackling with updates. Sir, Denver International extends our deepest apologies. We're implementing immediate corrective measures. Officer Martinez removed his hat respectfully. Colonel, I should have recognized... Sir, I'm deeply sorry for the confusion. But Jessica wasn't finished. Years of airline authority had conditioned her to challenge passenger complaints. The sudden reverence from her colleagues felt like a coordinated performance. Wait just a minute, she said, her voice rising. I don't care who he called. Documentation irregularities are documentation irregularities. The jet bridge fell silent. Every eye turned toward her in disbelief. Colonel Washington slowly ended his call and turned to face Jessica directly. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of 2 decades commanding soldiers in combat zones. Ms. Chen, do you know what happens when military protocol is violated during a dignified transfer? Jessica lifted her chin defiantly. I know what happens when passengers try to intimidate crew with fake phone calls, and you're about to find out. Colonel Washington reached into his document folder and withdrew a leather credential case. Inside, a federal identification card gleamed under the jet bridge lighting. The seal of the Department of Defense was embossed in gold. I am Colonel David Washington, Director of Military Family Affairs, Pentagon. I oversee dignified transfer operations for all fallen service members returning to American soil. He turned the credential case toward the gathering crowd. The ID was unmistakable. Federal authority, direct report to the Secretary of Defense, security clearance level stamped in official print. Every fallen soldier who comes home passes through my oversight. Every family who loses a child, parent, or spouse in service to this country receives support through my department. Jessica's confidence began cracking. That could still be fake. Colonel Washington's phone showed 17 missed calls. The contact list read like a Pentagon directory: Secretary of Defense, Joint Chiefs of Staff, Congressional Military Affairs Committee, White House Military Office. The casket on that tarmac contains Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, killed 3 days ago in Syria while providing medical aid to wounded civilians. She was 23 years old. A daughter, a sister, a combat medic who died saving lives. His voice remained steady, but emotion flickered behind his eyes. Her family is waiting at Denver International Airport right now. Her mother, her 2 younger brothers, her grandparents who raised her after her father died in Iraq. The live stream audience had grown to 8,200 viewers. Military families across the country shared the feed. Chad Delta discrimination was trending nationally alongside #military respect and #Sergeant Rodriguez. I personally escort every KIA soldier home because these families deserve dignity in their darkest moments. Not bureaucratic delays, not suspicious glares, not humiliation from airline staff who question their loved one's sacrifice. Patricia's phone rang again. This time she answered immediately. This is Gate Supervisor Patricia. Yes, sir. Understood. Immediately, sir. She ended the call and approached Colonel Washington with visible anxiety. Sir, that was Delta's Vice President of Operations. He's personally flying here from Atlanta. The CEO has been briefed. Jessica stepped backward, finally understanding the magnitude of her miscalculation. I was just following security protocols. No, Colonel Washington interrupted quietly. You were following prejudice. There's a difference. Captain Reynolds' radio crackled with updates from air traffic control. Delta 447, Pentagon has contacted FAA directly. You have priority clearance for immediate departure. All other traffic is being held. The businessman in 2A captured Colonel Washington's next words perfectly. Ms. Chen, you asked for proof of purchase. Let me show you what I actually purchased. He withdrew another document from his folder. Official letterhead, Department of Defense seal, signed by the Secretary himself. This is my federal authorization for dignified transfer operations. It grants me authority over all aspects of military remains transport on civilian aircraft. Every major airline has copies of this authorization in their operations manuals. Jessica's hands trembled as she read the document. The language was clear, unambiguous, and devastating to her position. This authorization supersedes standard passenger protocols. Military escorts receive priority boarding, dedicated support, and complete autonomy during dignified transfers. Patricia pulled out her tablet and quickly accessed Delta's operations manual. Page 847, Military Dignified Transfer Protocols. The procedures were explicit. Military escorts received VIP treatment, no questions asked. Sir, Patricia said quietly, this should never have happened. Our staff receives specific training on these protocols. Colonel Washington looked directly at Jessica. Training that apparently wasn't absorbed. The live stream comments erupted. She's done. Delta is going to fire everyone. Military families deserve respect. Boycott Delta until they fix this. News vans were pulling up outside the terminal. KDEN, Fox 31, and CBS 4 had crews racing to the scene. The story was breaking nationally on military news websites. Jessica made one final attempt to salvage her position. I was protecting airline security. Anyone can claim to be military. Anyone cannot claim to be Colonel David Washington, Pentagon Director of Military Family Affairs, he replied calmly. That would be impersonating a federal official, a felony carrying 5 years in federal prison. He showed his phone screen displaying the Pentagon directory. His name, photo, and title were listed prominently in the Department of Defense Leadership section. Anyone cannot authorize dignified transfers for fallen soldiers. Anyone cannot carry federal credentials signed by the Secretary of Defense. Anyone cannot activate Pentagon Protocol 77 Alpha with a single phone call. The weight of realization crashed over Jessica like a wave. She'd humiliated a Pentagon director, delayed a fallen soldier's homecoming, created a national incident that was being broadcast live to thousands of viewers. Captain Reynolds stepped forward urgently. Colonel Washington, if you'll please board immediately, we can have you and Sergeant Rodriguez airborne in 5 minutes. Not yet, the colonel replied quietly. This situation requires resolution before I can focus on my mission. His phone buzzed with another call. This time, the caller ID showed Delta Airlines, CEO Direct Line. Colonel Washington looked at the gathering crowd. Jessica pale and trembling, Patricia frantically reviewing protocols, Officer Martinez standing at attention, Captain Reynolds checking his watch nervously. One phone call changed everything, he said quietly. But the real question is, how many other military families have faced this same discrimination without the authority to make that call? The live stream viewer count hit 12,000. The story was now trending on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Military support organizations were mobilizing. Corporate crisis management teams were activating. And in a flag-draped casket on the tarmac below, Sergeant Maria Rodriguez waited to go home. Colonel Washington answered the CEO's call with the same calm authority he'd maintained throughout the crisis. Around him, airline officials watched nervously as their corporate nightmare unfolded in real time. This is Colonel Washington. Colonel, this is Richard Chen, CEO of Delta Airlines. I'm calling to personally apologize for this unconscionable treatment of you and Sergeant Rodriguez. The name wasn't lost on anyone present. Jessica Chen's face went ashen as she realized the CEO shared her surname. No relation, but the coincidence felt like cosmic irony. Mr. Chen, apologies are appreciated but insufficient. Let me explain the scope of what's occurred here. Colonel Washington's voice carried across the jet bridge with military precision. The live stream captured every word for 14,500 viewers who hung on each syllable. Delta Airlines currently holds contracts worth $78 million annually for military family transport services. That represents 23% of all military dignified transfers in the continental United States. Patricia frantically pulled up contract databases on her tablet. The numbers were staggering. Military families represented 1.4 million potential passengers yearly across all service branches. These contracts exist under Federal Acquisition Regulation 52.219-23, which requires strict compliance with military support protocols. Violations can result in immediate contract suspension pending Department of Defense review. Richard Chen's voice tightened over the speaker. "Colonel, what can we do to make this right immediately?" "The damage extends beyond my personal treatment, Mr. Chen. This incident is being broadcast live to 15,000 viewers. Military Times has picked up the story. Congressional Military Affairs Committee staff are monitoring developments." Comments flooded the live stream faster than moderators could track. Delta stock down 2.3%. Boycott Delta trending. Military families everywhere sharing this. My vet dad is furious. Jessica stood frozen, finally comprehending the economic earthquake she'd triggered. 78 million in contracts. Hundreds of millions in potential lost revenue. Stock price fluctuations affecting pension funds and institutional investors. Furthermore, Colonel Washington continued, this incident violates several federal statutes. Title 14, CFR Part 117.4 specifically governs dignified transfer protocols on commercial aircraft. He recited the regulation from memory. All airline personnel must provide unrestricted accommodation for military escort officers during dignified transfer operations. Questioning credentials or demanding additional verification constitutes federal interference with military operations. Captain Reynolds pulled up the regulation on his phone. The language was explicit. What Jessica had done wasn't just wrong, it was potentially criminal. The Military Family Life Act of 2003, Section 1784, protects military families from discrimination in transportation services. Violations carry penalties up to $50,000 per incident, plus potential civil rights charges. Patricia's radio crackled with updates from Delta headquarters. Legal teams were assembling. Crisis management consultants were being activated. The company's military liaison office was fielding calls from Pentagon officials. Sir, Patricia interrupted carefully, our regional director is en route. VP of Operations James Mitchell should arrive within 2 hours. Colonel Washington checked his watch. Sergeant Rodriguez's family gathering starts in 3 hours. Every minute we delay extends their anguish. The weight of that statement settled over everyone present. A mother waiting for her daughter's body, brothers preparing to say goodbye, grandparents who'd lost 2 generations to military service. Richard Chen's voice returned over the speaker. Colonel Washington, I'm personally flying to Denver. Whatever resources you need. Mr. Chen, this isn't about resources, it's about systematic change. Colonel Washington pulled out his tablet and accessed real-time social media analytics. The data was devastating for Delta's reputation. Hashtag Boycott Delta has generated 18,000 mentions in the past hour. Military family organizations across all service branches are sharing this live stream. Veterans Affairs departments in 12 states have issued statements condemning the treatment. Jessica finally found her voice, though it cracked with desperation. I was following standard security protocols. I couldn't have known. You could have listened, Colonel Washington replied quietly. When I showed military identification, when I explained my mission, when I mentioned a fallen soldier waiting on the tarmac. He turned to address the growing crowd of officials. Let me clarify the economic implications of this incident. The colonel accessed Department of Defense spending databases on his secure tablet. The numbers were staggering. Military personnel and families book approximately 2.8 million flights annually across all carriers. Average ticket price is $437. That's $1.2 billion in annual revenue for the airline industry. Patricia's hands trembled as she calculated Delta's market share. nearly $300 million in potential annual revenue from military customers alone. Delta's military satisfaction rating, according to last quarter's DoD survey, was 3.2 out of 5, already below acceptable standards. This incident will likely drop that rating below 2.0. Captain Reynolds received an urgent message from flight operations. Sir, we're getting reports of military families canceling Delta reservations in real time. Customer service is overwhelmed. The live stream viewer count hit 18,000. Major news networks were picking up the story. CNN had contacted the Pentagon for official comment. Fox News was preparing a segment on military family discrimination. The Congressional Military Affairs Committee oversees an annual defense budget of $740 billion. Approximately $12 billion of that flows through civilian contractor services, including transportation. Colonel Washington's voice remained steady, but the implications were clear. Congressional attention meant oversight hearings. Oversight hearings meant public testimony. Public testimony meant national scrutiny of airline practices. Moreover, the Federal Transit Administration can revoke operating certificates for carriers that violate federal anti-discrimination statutes. Delta operates under Certificate DOT-OST 2023-0127. Patricia frantically searched FAA databases. The certificate was indeed Delta's primary operating authority. Without it, the airline couldn't fly. Richard Chen's voice returned, now clearly panicked. Colonel, please tell me what Delta can do to resolve this situation and prevent further damage. Mr. Chen, you have two choices. The jet bridge fell silent except for the distant hum of aircraft engines and the quiet buzz of phones recording everything. Choice 1. Full corporate accountability within 48 hours. Public apology acknowledging systematic failures. Comprehensive retraining for all customer-facing staff. New policies specifically protecting military family travel. And significant financial commitment to military family support organizations. Jessica's legs wobbled. She grabbed the jet bridge railing for support. Choice 2. Face federal investigation under multiple statutes. Lose military contracts worth $78 million annually. Endure congressional oversight hearings with national media coverage. And explain to shareholders why stock value dropped due to discriminating against military families. The businessman in 2A whispered to his audience, "He's giving them an ultimatum. This is incredible." Comments exploded across social media. "Give them hell, Colonel." "Justice for Sergeant Rodriguez." "Delta better choose wisely." "Military families deserve respect." Furthermore, Colonel Washington continued, this decision will influence how the entire airline industry treats military families. Other carriers are watching. Military family organizations are coordinating responses. He showed his phone screen displaying messages from veterans groups, military spouse organizations, and Gold Star families. Hundreds of organizations were mobilizing support. The American Legion has 1.8 million members. Veterans of Foreign Wars has 1.6 million. Military Child Education Coalition represents 500,000 military children. All are monitoring this situation. Patricia received another call from headquarters. She listened briefly, then approached Colonel Washington with visible anxiety. "Sir, our CEO wants you to implement immediate changes. Full policy review starting tomorrow. Mandatory military sensitivity training for all staff, and..." She paused. "Termination of personnel responsible for this incident." Jessica's face went white. "Wait, that's not..." "Ms. Chen," Colonel Washington interrupted, "your choices created this situation. The consequences are proportional to the damage caused." He turned back to address the CEO over speakerphone. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate rapid response, but sustainable change requires more than personnel actions. What do you recommend, Colonel?" "Establish a military family advisory board with direct access to senior leadership. Implement real-time monitoring of military passenger experiences. Create dedicated military family customer service protocols. And commit $2 million annually to military family support programs." The specificity of his demands revealed careful preparation. This wasn't emotional reaction. It was strategic planning executed with military precision. Most importantly, ensure this never happens to another family whose loved one paid the ultimate price for American freedom. Through the jet bridge windows, Sergeant Rodriguez's casket remained visible on the tarmac. A constant reminder of why this moment mattered beyond corporate policies and public relations. 48 hours, Mr. Chen. Then congressional hearings begin, and this becomes a national conversation about how America treats its military families. The line went silent, except for the sound of a CEO realizing his company's reputation hung in the balance. 4 hours later. The live stream had ended, but the consequences rippled through corporate America like shockwaves. Jessica Chen sat in Delta's Employee Relations Office, termination paperwork spread before her. 23 years of airline service concluded with a single signature. Effective immediately, Regional Director James Mitchell read from the official document, termination for violation of federal anti-discrimination policies and failure to follow established military family protocols. Jessica's hands shook as she signed. The viral video had been viewed 847,000 times across all platforms. Her name trended nationally alongside #DeltaDiscrimination. Future employers would find this story with a simple Google search. Meanwhile, Gate Supervisor Patricia faced a different fate. Suspension pending comprehensive retraining, Mitchell continued. You'll undergo 40 hours of military family sensitivity education before reinstatement consideration. Captain Reynolds received his consequences through a formal crew scheduling notice, mandatory diversity training, official reprimand, and 6-month probationary status. But the real changes were happening at corporate headquarters in Atlanta. 6 hours after the incident, Delta CEO Richard Chen stood before an emergency board meeting, his usual confidence replaced by crisis management mode. On the wall-mounted screens, social media analytics painted a devastating picture. Military family cancellations are up 400% since this morning, Chief Operating Officer Sarah Martinez reported. We've lost approximately $1.2 million in bookings in 6 hours. The stock price had stabilized after an initial 3.1% drop, but only after Chen's emergency public statement promising immediate reforms. The Pentagon Liaison Office received 17 calls from military family organizations today, Legal Counsel David Kim added. Congressional Military Affairs Committee has requested a formal briefing within 10 days. Chen pulled up Colonel Washington's specific demands on his tablet. We're implementing every recommendation. No exceptions. 24 hours later, the corporate response team worked through the night. By sunrise, Delta's website featured a prominent military family portal with dedicated customer service numbers, priority booking systems, and comprehensive support resources. The CEO's video apology garnered 2.3 million views within 12 hours. Delta Airlines failed Colonel Washington and dishonored Sergeant Rodriguez's sacrifice. We accept full responsibility and commit to earning back the trust of military families. The company pledged $2 million annually to military family support programs. The first beneficiary, the Rodriguez Family Scholarship Fund for Children of Fallen Soldiers. 48 hours after the incident. The systemic changes Colonel Washington demanded were already taking shape. Honor Guard Protocol. All airline personnel received emergency training bulletins. Military escorts now received automatic VIP status, expedited security clearance, and dedicated gate agents. Military family recognition training. Every customer-facing employee, 73,000 people across Delta's network, would complete mandatory education within 90 days. Dignified Transfer Monitoring App. Real-time tracking for all military remains transport, with direct Pentagon coordination and family notification systems. Military Family Advisory Board. 12 military spouses, veterans, and Gold Star family members received direct access to executive leadership for policy feedback. Zero tolerance policy. Any discrimination against military families resulted in immediate termination, no exceptions. Industry competitors moved quickly to avoid similar incidents. American Airlines announced enhanced military family policies within 36 hours. United implemented new training protocols. Southwest created dedicated military customer service teams. 1 week later, the intellectual victory was complete. Colonel Washington had chosen education over litigation, transformation over punishment. No lawsuits were filed, no criminal charges pursued. Instead, sustainable change protected future military families. Military Times named the incident a watershed moment for veteran travel rights. Mamas. The Washington Post editorial board praised Colonel Washington's dignified restraint under pressure. Veterans Affairs Secretary issued a statement commending his strategic leadership in advancing military family welfare. Measurable impact. 30 days later, Delta's military satisfaction scores jumped from 3.2 to 4.7 out of 5. Military family bookings returned to pre-incident levels within 3 weeks. Stock price recovered fully and gained 1.8% above previous levels. More importantly, military families reported improved treatment industry-wide. The Washington Protocol became standard operating procedure across major airlines. 3 additional carriers proactively implemented similar policies without incidents. Congressional hearings were canceled after Pentagon officials confirmed satisfactory corporate response. Federal oversight transitioned to routine monitoring rather than punitive investigation. The personal resolution. Sergeant Maria Rodriguez received full military honors upon arrival in Denver. Her family, initially devastated by the airport delay, expressed gratitude for Colonel Washington's advocacy. "He fought for our daughter's dignity when we couldn't," her mother said. The colonel's Pentagon superiors commended his restraint and strategic thinking. He turned a discrimination incident into a teachable moment for corporate America, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin noted in his quarterly military family report. Military leadership academies now study the incident as a case study in professional dignity under pressure. Colonel Washington's response became required reading for officers transitioning to Pentagon assignments involving civilian coordination. The fallen soldier's story, initially overshadowed by controversy, received proper recognition. Sergeant Rodriguez's Purple Heart ceremony drew national media attention, highlighting her medical service in Syria rather than the airport discrimination. 6 months later, Jessica Chen worked at a local coffee shop in suburban Denver. Customer service, minimum wage, no benefits. A dramatic fall from airline management salary and travel privileges. Colonel Washington remained at the Pentagon, ensuring no military family would face such humiliation again. That's the difference between temporary authority and lasting change. 1 year later, Colonel David Washington stood in his Pentagon office, reviewing quarterly reports on military family travel experiences. The numbers told a remarkable story of systemic transformation. Airline discrimination incidents had dropped 73% industry-wide. Military families traveled with increased confidence and respect. The Washington Protocol appeared in business school case studies nationwide, teaching future executives about the power of institutional accountability. On his desk sat a handwritten letter from Maria Rodriguez's mother. "Colonel, because of your courage that day, my daughter's sacrifice meant something beyond her service. You gave her dignity in death and gave our family hope that someone fights for military families." But the real measure of success wasn't in corporate policies or Pentagon reports. It was in the phone calls that didn't come. Military families who traveled without incident, who received respect rather than suspicion, who could grieve their loved ones without additional trauma. The broader legacy. These real-life stories demonstrate something profound about quiet strength overcoming injustice. True power isn't about raising your voice or making threats. It's about knowing exactly when to use the authority you've earned through decades of dedicated service and sacrifice. Colonel Washington's response became a model for how individuals can create lasting institutional change. not through anger or confrontation, but through strategic use of legitimate authority and unwavering commitment to principle. The incident sparked federal legislation protecting military family travel rights. The Sergeant Rodriguez Military Family Protection Act passed both houses of Congress with bipartisan support, ensuring no service member's family would face similar discrimination. Personal transformation. Colonel Washington continued escorting fallen soldiers home, but now with industry-wide support rather than bureaucratic obstacles. He spoke at airline industry conferences, sharing touching stories of military sacrifice while teaching corporate leaders about respectful service. Young military officers sought his mentorship, learning how professional dignity under pressure could achieve more than emotional reactions. His approach, calm persistence backed by institutional knowledge, became standard curriculum at military leadership schools. The Rodriguez family maintained contact, considering him extended family. Each year on Maria's birthday, they sent updates about the scholarship recipients who benefited from Delta's committed funding. Systemic impact. Military spouses reported dramatic improvements in travel experiences across all major carriers. Gold Star families received priority support during their most difficult journeys. Veterans traveling for medical appointments encountered trained, sensitive staff rather than suspicious interrogation. The black stories and life stories of discrimination that once filled military family forums were replaced by accounts of respectful treatment and corporate accommodation. The enduring message. Sometimes the most powerful response to injustice isn't confrontation. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your worth and having the institutional authority to create lasting change. When you witness discrimination that seems impossible to fight, remember Colonel Washington's approach. Document everything. Know your rights. Use proper channels. And never underestimate the power of one person speaking truth to institutional power. Have you witnessed discrimination that left you feeling powerless? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes one person's courage to speak up can change an entire system. These touching stories need to be heard because they remind us that individual action can transform institutions. When we share these experiences, we build networks of support and accountability. Subscribe to Black Voices Speak for more stories of quiet strength overcoming injustice. Hit that notification bell because these real-life stories of courage and systemic change inspire others to stand up when it matters most. Together, we can ensure that dignity and respect aren't privileges to be earned, but rights to be protected.